Welcome to the Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Scott Clark.
And I'm Dave Dale. Before we get into our interview with the new police chief, Daryl Longworth.
Hang on. I think you're to talk about police and our encounters with police, right?
Yes.
Can I have, I need to talk about just one thing before we get into that, and that's City Hall. Okay?
Okay.
So there was this one, when I first moved here in 91, I remember looking at City Hall and I'm like, why do the windows not match? You notice that? How they're not all the same. Some reflect differently, right? And then someone said, oh, when someone replaced the windows, they didn't have the same glass and they had to have different ones. I go, well, that looks weird. Like it's not uniform, right? It looks funny. So just last week, I went by and I noticed they're installing new glass, which is another color altogether. And I'm like, it
is Pride Month.
So to have the rainbow of colors on the building, which makes sense. But it's like, seriously, like a glass expert can't figure out to get the same glass. Like to me, it looks silly. But to you, it probably looks like gold. I don't know. What does it look like to you? Or you don't even notice?
I have never even noticed.
Stop it. You covered City Hall and you never noticed all the different color glass and none of it's uniform?
I'm usually there in the evening when the sun's on it and it reflects beautifully the horizon and I take photos of that. And
Are you optimistic in this moment? Because I'm not.
No, I find beauty in the...
in the chaos?
Yeah. It just looks like a big toilet. That's the biggest problem with that thing. It's not the windows.
It doesn't look...
Yeah, the council chamber looks like the bowl, and it's attached to the back of the tank. Yeah. Look at it. You'll never see it again in the same way.
You're like, you get that? Okay, I'll have to look at it. I've never noticed it as a toilet. Okay, I'm going to look. I'm actually going to contact maybe Pierre over at Castle Glass. Find out Pierre. Tell me what's going on there, because you're a glass expert. Let me know what's happening here.
I'm glad you're onto this project there. That's good.
So we have the police chief coming in. This is awesome. You've been trying to get the police chief in for a while, so looking forward to this.
Yeah, very, very busy guy. Glad to have him in. I want to ask him a few more questions, and I'm glad that he's so articulate and open to communication with people.
Yeah. Cool. He spoke at council. Sounds really good. He had the, coffee talk with the chief, which was fantastic.
He's doing all the right things.
He's doing all the right things. That scares you when he does the right things?
Well, I have this, thing with authority and police are.
Why? Have you had a bad encounter with police?
A couple.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you share any?
Yeah, sure. Let me see. When I was 17, we were two times in Canton, Ohio. So I was dealing with state troopers there. Chased into the town, crashed the vehicle. I was a passenger. We were drunk. And hauled out, guns to the heads, handcuffed. It was pretty scary, and I probably deserved it.
Hey? Why were you fleeing?
My buddy heard the story of us being chased by the cops about a month prior, and we got away. So he thought he could do the same thing.
Oh, so you've already fled and then you weren't caught.
Yeah, a different time, different county,
all right,
different sheriff.
Right.
But we were coming off the highway. Canton is in between Akron and Mississauga. Oh, no, I can't remember the name of it. Anyways, we just came off the highway too quick. All of a sudden, we had a trooper on the back, and my buddy was racing straight downtown towards the cop shop. So we ended up with about 7 cruisers around us.
Oh.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. And now, I shouldn't hold that against them because we kind of deserved it.
You kind of deserved it. You totally deserved it.
But it does make me look over my shoulder once in a while. Yeah.
Well, don't flee.
Yeah. Yeah.
My story wasn't about fleeing. It was about my radio, my time in radio. I remember it was Mother's Day weekend, and I was driving down to Toronto to see Mom, and right around Powassan, I was pulled over for speeding. And then, at the end, they give you the ticket and say, have a nice day. Right. And so when I got back on the radio on Monday and I started talking, why do police say, have a nice day? You just made my day terrible. Like, and I just go off on this bit about why do they say have a nice day? It's like, it's a terrible day now. And, and I have the officer's name and I start giving them a hard time. Right. And all this stuff in it. And then it was like a weekend or two later, I was asked to come out to Camp Minnehaha out in Port Loring. And God rest his soul, I read in the obits in the last week, Jake Weller from Jake's Place out in Port Loring just recently passed away. I DJ'd his daughter's weddings, and so he was like such an incredible part of the Port Loring area and fundraising and snowmobiling and all these incredible stuff. So I was heading out there, see Jake and the crew out there, and then of course I'm behind, and so I'm racing. I'm heading out there. It's like 80K, and then there was this speed trap, and then I went, oh, I'm in the station van. I'm like, oh no, and then he comes up and he goes, it's the same cop, and he goes, hello, Scott. I went, no, the guy that I was just slaying on air. I'm like, this is so bad. He says, yeah.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, you're about to have a great day. And I'm like, dang, I deserve that. And then so I took him.
Karma's a bitch, eh?
It really is. And so I made them like office of the week or whatever. And so I took down donuts and coffee mugs and all that sort of stuff down to the Powassan OPP detachment. But that was but it was like, that must have felt great for him. It was like, you jerk. It's like, have a nice day.
I have to say that I have no real right to be real against cops or anything like that. I just have that reflexive. Every time I've had interaction with them, I've had the decent, I got off or I got a warning. They treated me well.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel, I feel like guilty of something when I see a police officer, but I don't know what it is.
I start sweating as soon as I see a cop car.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I could be doing nothing wrong and get pulled over and I'd be sweating and nervous. I get an anxiety attack.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder what that is. Is it an authority thing we have?
It's an authority thing because you're afraid of what could happen because you don't really know. I don't know. My parents, we crossed the border all the time when we were growing up. And I've told this story where my folks were booze and cigarette runners and 222s, the drug runners as well. They'd load the car up for their friends when they go one way, and they load it up to bring the stuff in the States.
Wait a second, your parents were drug runners?
Well, they didn't really call it that, but they the cigarettes were just, right? But really, we had more booze than we should. We had more cigarettes than we should. And my mom was bringing painkillers across because she couldn't get certain painkillers across on both sides. So both ways, it was like, shut up, be quiet. We're coming near the border. Yeah. Oh my God, we might get arrested.
Yeah.
Well, no wonder I have an anxiety.
Well, you know what? I have the exact same story, minus the drugs. But when we were come across the border, we'd be in this little Honda Accord hatchback. Yeah. And it was like, the Scottish family is like, and my brother and I in the back seat, don't you two say a word. Don't say a word. Now sit there and be quiet. And in the back, there's, I don't know how many cartons of cigarettes, exactly. How many boxes of booze, and we have all our stuff. You're right. It was smuggling for sure. So even my brother and I talk about it today when we go through customs. We, get anxiety filled. We have nothing. We're not doing anything, but I think it's from those days when we're told, don't you say a word, little. It's like
one other time I got pulled over, OPP up. I was taking the company van to go pick up the publisher of the Northern Times, who was an MP, Rene Piché, and I was late, and I was racing through Smooth Rock, and I got pulled over, and the guy says, "What are you up to?" Well, I got to pick up Mr. Piché at the airport. I'm late. He says, "Well, get moving."
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how times change. Like, two of my nieces are OPP officers now, and so we have other family members too, and so you look at policing very different now, and there's a different narrative when they tell you how tough that job is, and so I'm looking forward to hearing what the chief has to say. He's spoken well, and let's hear what he has to say.
Yeah, that'd be good. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Founded in 1968, Voyageur Aviation is a proud member of our community, providing worldwide aviation services from our headquarters right here in North Bay. If you're looking for a challenge, change, or want to expand your current career in aviation, Voyageur is hiring for a wide range of technical and non-technical roles, including pilots, aircraft maintenance personnel, corporate administration, machinists, supply chain professionals, and more. Be part of a workforce that is over 400 strong. supporting humanitarian, government, defense, and civil aviation operations around the world. For a career in aviation and beyond, learn more about open positions and career paths at voyav.com.
Today we have the new police chief, Daryl Longworth. Thank you for coming in.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Nice to have you in, Chief. Thanks for coming in. You've been busy the last little bit. You come into town and you start having coffee with everyone.
I've been busy. That's the best way to get to know a policeman is go to the coffee shop. No donuts so far, though.
No, not nowadays. Nowadays, you guys got to keep in shape. Like men and women, that's interesting. Like you often see an officer over a long period of time will start having back problems because I have a few buddies that are, and two nieces also, they're OPP. And the amount of gear, how many pounds, you guys must weigh it, how many pounds of gear?
I've never weighed it, to be honest. But when you factor in the vest, all the stuff around your waist, and now there's so much stuff, unless you have a very, very broad base for your waistline, we're starting to put it up on the vest as well, so which adds some shoulder pulls. Because it's so spread out now, I would estimate it's at least 10 to 15 pounds at least extra you're carrying. It could be more. I don't know. Yeah,
it's got to be with all that. And does it because you were with Woodstock Police, London Police?
I actually started my career in Halton Region, so in the GTA. I worked there for 3.5 years. And then I went back home, which was Woodstock for me. Okay. Spent 20 years there, finished there as a deputy chief. Opportunity came up to be a deputy chief in London. So I moved there and then back to Woodstock as a chief for a few years, then retired briefly and then back here. So all to say that I really can't keep a job. I just keep bouncing around the province.
Does the uniform change from city to city? Or is it outside of the badge is the only thing that changes?
Predominantly, it's the same except for the shoulder patch.
Yeah.
And there might be some nuances with, name tags might have a little Canadian flag sometimes, or some forces, whether you have rank or not, wear an epaulette, like I'm wearing on my shoulder with their badge number on it. But for the most part, and there's the province dictates what we wear. Okay. So they want uniformity across the province. But they want, when somebody sees somebody who's dressed like me, they know that's a police officer and not a security guard. And they're very protective. You'll notice our special constables wear a light blue shirt. Yeah. The auxiliary unit that I've talked about bringing here wears a light blue shirt. Security guards aren't allowed really to wear these colors because they don't want anybody confused that that's not a police officer.
How many years did you have in the force before you retired?
30, just a little over 30 years.
Wow. And why would you take on a job like this after, I'm sure you have a pretty good pension?
Yeah, that's a good question. And my wife has asked me several times, what the heck are you thinking? But, I felt, I'll be honest, coming out of the COVID years and my time in Woodstock, were 3+ years of nonstop crisis. I was a week on the job there when the police service and the city was subject to the victim of a cyber attack, a ransomware attack, which shut down all of our computer systems. So we spent the better part of going back to old school. Information was passed by way of binder from platoon to share information, apps we were using to communicate while the computer system was cleansed and make sure nothing private information hadn't left the building. So that was a big thing. And then from there, that was a 3 or 4 month crisis. Then we rolled into COVID, which we all know was very troublesome to work through. Every day things changed. It was constant trying to keep one step ahead to make sure our people were safe, the community was safe, still being required to deliver emergency response and investigations to the public, but not being able to interact with the public. It was a very demanding time. At the same time, my board had tasked me with succession planning, and it just seemed the right time. The guy I was training up to be the chief was ready to go. We just developed a strategic plan, so I thought, what better time to hand off to him and let him carry the ball moving forward with the new plan and implement that the way he saw fit. And I was ready for a break. It was time for a change. I did a lot of stuff. So I retired, did a lot of stuff around the house, all those to-do jobs that take more than a couple weekends to do and knock those out of the park. Did a lot of volunteer board work and was still engaged with the police service. I was doing some background investigations for some HR departments for some police services. And then, when you retire from this level of position, you get those invitations, would you be interested in this job? Would you be interested in this job? And none of them seemed to be the right fit for me. This North Bay job, I got an email, which I ignored the first one. I got a second email asking if I'd be willing to at least talk to somebody from the agency who was doing the recruiting. So I did. My wife and I were already looking at property up north. Our daughter was going to school in Sudbury for the last year. So we've been up here looking around. We'd started looking at property at Sudbury. So it just seemed the stars
that would
were
have been discouraging.
aligned. I've heard that since I came here. Yeah. Thank God you came to North Bay. But just the stars were aligning with this job. We both felt, my wife and I, we talked a lot about it. We talked a lot about it with our kids who are mostly grown and moved on. But everybody felt at peace with it. And they all gave me some strong encouragement. If you think this is the right thing for you. I've always believed everything happens for a reason. So there's a reason I'm here. And hopefully I'm a good fit for the community, just as I've seen so far. I think the community is a good fit for me and my family.
It really feels that way. It was watch your presentation at council. It was really nice. I like your tonality. I like how you present. And again, have a number of friends in the force as well. And I'm hearing good things about you because the leadership within is so it's so interesting. As public members, we see two things, right? You're the admin team, and so you have to connect with that force of officers that are truly going through a lot. There's a lot happening right now, and it's not just here. I'm assuming it's all over.
Right.
I'm curious because just before we turned the microphone on, we talked about, we're talking about Merv, and it's like, Merv's doing some, media relations, and Merv's a great guy and has done so much for the community in Special Olympics. And you talked about, we need a more proactive approach that we're communicating with the public, we're communicating with the community, let them know what's happening. What did you learn? I don't want to get into the details about London when you were in London, but I think you were there during the time of the Canada World Junior scandals, I think.
I was just on my way out.
But that would have been massive. You must have learned in that time, like that's a national or even bigger than national story. What do you learn through that, how it was handled, how we could have communicated better, how there's all these tools in your toolbox you're bringing to us now, right?
Right. So it's a difficult question for me to answer because I had announced I was leaving London in May. I think the incident actually happened April or May. So it was in the process of being investigated, but unfortunately, at that time, that investigation hadn't come up to our level yet. London's so big, we get notified of the major investigations. For whatever reason, that didn't come up to us. And I have to look at the timelines to see whether that was a mistake that was made or just the timing wasn't right. And because I announced in May, I was actually out of the building by June, using up holidays and things like that before I left. But there were some other things that I learned in London. And I think no police service in the province was not untouched by the unfounded story, sexual assaults.
I bet.
And so that was a big thing. London was kind of the flagship for that one. When Robin Doolittle and the Globe and Mail came out with their report, London was the focus of that initial release. And that was a scramble for us to say, what have we done wrong? We started meeting with community members and organization directors from women's rights groups and victims' rights groups to talk to them about how we can do better. And the chief at the time when I was in London, John Perry, was a good mentor for that. I watched him go through that process. I walked alongside with him going through that process about having to manage a crisis where, we did something not right, something not intentionally, but we hadn't been living up to the expectations that the community holds the police service as a high expectation. They expect a lot of us. Unfortunately, they expect perfection, which can never be achieved. But admitting when we made a mistake and then looking for a path forward to how to improve it was a good lesson for me on a major community issue, how the police navigate that. And I think as an outsider watching what London has done in response to what now has become this big story of the investigation, what was done, what was not done, I think London's following the similar playbook of if we've done something, let's review it. If we've done something wrong, let's admit it. And let's figure out a process so that we don't go through this again. And we live up to those community expectations.
That must make an entire force grow when things like that happen. It's probably that one's just had such a massive spotlight,
right?
Because I'm sure through your career, things like that might pop up. where you'd have to deal with it, but nothing of that magnitude, like
Right.
with the spotlight. But everything I'd seen. But going back to from a communication standpoint, you probably learned so much. Even I'm trying to think. There was a number of things in Woodstock. Even Woodstock's been in the news. It's not like it isn't in the news
Yeah,
either.
we used
right?
to say if something bad was going to happen, it was going to happen in Woodstock. And I don't know if that was my black cloud. Hopefully I haven't brought that black cloud to North Bay. But we did live through the Tori Stafford investigation,
Yes.
missing and murdered and
Yes.
sexually abused, assaulted young girl, 8-year-old girl. That was a very difficult time in my career.
You were there then?
Yeah, I was inspector in charge of operations at that time.
What does it do? That's like, it was, I'm hundreds of kilometers away and it's gut wrenching.
Right.
What does it do to the people that are investigating, that are?
It really takes its toll. It rips their heart out. And I'll tell you, that's where my keen interest in wellness of our members really started to formulate, because our service had been through a 2-year-old who was killed by a drunk driver on Thanksgiving weekend with his family. That was in October. In November, we had a homicide investigation of a missing person who'd been missing for over a year and a half, who'd been dissected and buried in somebody's backyard, that our officers had to deal with. And then rolling right out of that, we rolled right into the Tori Stafford investigation, which, as you know, was very intensive. At the time, it was the largest major case that had ever been tracked through the major case management system in the whole country. Because of the number of actions were generated, the number of tips that came in. We had tactical teams from all over the province come down. They walked the 401 ditches between Woodstock and Guelph looking for, it was massive, massive, massive investigation. And the sense of helplessness, especially in those initial days when she was missing but not found, the sense of helplessness that you want to get her back. You want to save this young girl, and then to find out she'd been murdered and damaged in such a way. The only saving grace for our officers, and if there's any saving grace to be had, was that we recognized that she was, the investigation revealed she had already been murdered before she'd even been reported missing to us. So there's nothing we could have done differently that would have changed the outcome.
If you went quicker or...
However, I know very personally the members, and some of them are off work. Some of them have had their families and their relationships end as a result of the trauma and the impact. So I've become very aware of what this job can do to a person, and what we as an organization and what I as a chief need to do to anything we can do. We're not going to solve the problems, but anything we do to mitigate, anything we can do to help is better than what we have to do something.
Mm-hmm. So one of the core things you spoke about at council was just that, about coming in and understanding. I think you said 92% of all the funding to the police is for salary. So there's not a lot of wiggle room when it comes to certain things, but it's salary to salary. And I don't want to say just our force. I think so many, as you mentioned, are dealing with certain traumas. And this is kind of, I guess, I must say, a clean slate for you, but you come in, it's all the stuff you've learned from the different organizations you've worked with to date. You're coming in, and you made it very clear that this is like if not the top priority. You want, number one, I think you said you want the community to feel safe, and I want my people to be safe as well. Can you talk about your
I want the
thoughts?
community to be safe, but I think I do that through my people. And if my people aren't well, if my people don't feel engaged, if my people don't feel motivated to come into work and do their job, then I'm going to fail on that number one priority. But I've always been convinced that I have two jobs as the police chief. One is to keep the community safe, and the other is to keep my members safe. But I've always been convinced if I can keep my members safe, I can do that second part, they'll look after the community for me. I won't have to demand and direct and order. They'll just do it because it's what they want to do. It's what they signed up to do. I've done hundreds of interviews with young recruits, and the common response to the question, "Why do you want to be a police officer?" is I want to help the community. I want to keep people safe. I want to catch bad guys. I want to make the world a better place. And they really do genuinely believe that. But somehow bureaucracy and administration and outside influences drag us away from that, and we get down a different path. And that can be discouraging when you want to do good and you go home at the end of the day and go, what do I do? What did I do all day? I have to remind the officers, sometimes we don't build a house and step back and go, wow, that's a beautiful house we just built. We go through our day, we answer radio calls, we deal with members of the public, having no idea the positive impact you just had on that one person who's having the worst day of their life, and you just came and made it better, hopefully. whether it was by just talking to them, whether it was by intervening and disrupting the bad behavior that was going on, or arresting somebody and removing that bad stimulus from their life. I've used the story of the officers. You don't know that drunk driver you just stopped might have killed a family 2 miles down the road. We'll never know. But rest assured, you do a good job every day. The public, I have to remind them, regardless of what you see or read in the media, everybody I talk in the public, no matter what community I've been, they really support the police. They're behind the police. They'll respect the police. But in turn, we have to give some return on investment that we're doing what they expect us to do as well. And that's keeping them safe and being visible and being professional in everything we do.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a really nice touch that you wore your bulletproof vest to council the other night.
Yeah.
And bit of a joke, a lot of people would want to wear that when they go to council, right? You've had a busy couple weeks here as far as crime goes. There was a shooting just the other day, attempted murder. Somebody stole a car. He was on release for similar things in Brampton up here. Pinned a police officer to another car.
Right.
A home invasion. You're used to all this kind of stuff, and we're getting used to it, unfortunately. What do you think about the crime in North Bay as it compares to others, and what do you think of where it's at and where you can bring it?
Well, it's interesting that the demographics I've looked at, crime does seem high here, but it's not as high as others in the north. And the north there seems to be a difference in crime trends between the north and the south, believe it or not. So can we impact on crime? Absolutely. If we can do our part and go after those prolific offenders who are doing the majority of the violent crime in the community, if they're in the community and we can target them and go after them and put them behind bars, great. If they're from outside this community and we're seeing a trend, and it's not just recently, I think it's been the last couple of years of people from the GTA selling drugs, coming up here with firearms because that's how they roll where they're from. They protect their turf. And being violent with the maybe the people who are traditionally involved in that organized crime, in that drug subculture, they want to come here and make a statement that we're taking over. We're here now, and we're going to rub you out if we need to, which then pushes people more homegrown to arm themselves as well and be prepared for that violence. So we are encountering more firearms on the street. Yesterday's example was another prime example. Friday's example was another prime example of, now, Friday's certainly was somebody from the GTA, but a number of the drug arrests that our street team has made in the last little while have been people from outside this community, from the south who are coming up here. It's going to be a trend that'll continue, and we'll have to adapt to that trend. We do partner with a lot of the agencies. There's a lot of information sharing that goes on behind the scenes. So when we're working targets that might be traveling to Sault Ste. Marie and Thunder Bay, we might be one stop on their circuit. So we're sharing information in the north, but also sharing information back and forth with the guns and gangs units across the province as well to keep track of these people. And it's something, again, we have to change with the changing times. And if this is something that's fairly new to North Bay, then we as a police service need to adapt to it. And again, looking at primarily making sure our officers are safe. Do they have the right equipment? Do they have the right training? Do they have the right tools to do what I'm asking them to do every day? And making sure they're safe. And certainly we can do our part. And I will echo again, I know it's been said a number of times, I think Chief Todd was very vocal about bail reform. And when I talk about bail reform, I'm not talking about bail reform for, small mischiefs and shoplifting and stuff. I'm talking about the ones who are violent crimes, the ones who are out on release on gun charges. We should not be finding in North Bay with a gun. That's end of story. And I think all levels of the justice system have to step up and do their part, including to police. We need to make the argument in the court, this person should not be released.
Do we need a bigger jail?
That I can't comment on. I haven't seen the jail, so I don't know much about the makeup and their level of crowding or overcrowding or undercrowding. I'm not sure.
More of a justice system issue, eh?
I think it's more. I wouldn't like to think that judges are making decisions because the jails may be full. I think when they decide that people need to be kept in custody to keep the community safe, that's the decision that needs to be made, not the implications of sending them to jail. So again, I don't know what the system, what the structure is like.
From my understanding, I think there is a feeling that there's because the jails are full and they try to get as many out as possible, because when it's over full, then they have to give extra time to those that are sitting in jail waiting for something, and reduces their actual punishment, even though they're just it's an accommodation issue. But yeah, I think they're working on that as well, trying to figure out what's the best guys, the criminals to keep behind bars longer. And I think that would help. I think we need a modernized jail attached to addiction treatment center. I say this all the time, we just don't have it organized very well.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for that one. And again, I'm still making my way through the community, trying to learn, and I haven't made my way to the jail yet, but that's one of the places I do want to go and just have conversations. But I do recognize, just from a philosophical, ideological standpoint, we send somebody to jail who may have drug addiction issues, and they're there for 2 months, 3 months, whatever it is, and maybe they're clean because they haven't had as much. Let's not kid ourselves. They do have access in the jails sometimes, but they may come out clean. And then what do? Without any supports, they go right back to the infrastructure, right back to the social people they hung around with, and they're right back in it. Whereas if we had some kind of support, and that's when we talk about wraparound services, we need to collectively, I'm not pointing the finger at any one group, I think collectively we have to get together and start talking to each other, so that when police hand them off to the jail and the jail hands them off back to the community, we all need to play a role in having some kind of an infrastructure. And again, my ignorance there might be processes already in existence within the jail to do that handover. But if not, let's look at what could be done better.
You're working with the hospital for better handover for mental health patients and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, I've been in touch with actually the OPP as well up here. I've done this in another community, and it's been quite successful. And I've already had conversations with the CAO and 2 of the VPs at the hospital that deal with mental health and the emergency services part. Mm-hmm. Everybody's on the same page, so it's just a matter of sitting down and hashing out an agreement with expectations and looking for opportunities to get our officers. Selfishly, my concern is getting my officers back on the street and out in the community where they need to be instead of waiting at the hospital. But some of the secondary things for the health benefits is it's better treatment for the individual that's going to the hospital as well, and destigmatizing them from sitting in the waiting room with handcuffs and getting them in and getting the help they need sooner than later.
North Bay Echo is proud to partner with Twiggs Coffee Roasters, a part of the community since 1995. Twiggs offers a wide selection of quality beans, fresh roasted in-house every day. Find your favorite specialty drinks at our espresso bar. Rejuvenate with freshly squeezed juice, or treat yourself to mouth-watering selections from our gourmet deli. And don't forget our irresistible fresh baked goods, including uncompromising gluten-free options. Twiggs has 5 locations to serve you, from North Bay to Sturgeon Falls to Sudbury. Order online for pickup at twigs.ca. And coming soon, you'll be able to order fresh roasted coffee beans direct to your doorstep from our distribution center in North Bay.
If you could magic wand, let's do a magic wand for a second. Go back 20 years in your career. What would policing look like today if we didn't have this incredible addiction, mental health, homeless issue that's happening everywhere? How different, because you talk about policing and earlier saying about crime, but I'm thinking, I don't know how much time you have with crime, because I've heard stories where you have most of the platoon at the hospital, and it's the police, not the police, sorry. Isn't it the doctors that release them once you're up there? That it's complex, right? It's super complex.
Yeah, the Mental Health Act says that we can, once we've apprehended them, they're in our custody until such time as the hospital accepts them, and it's usually a medical physician that has to accept them.
Right.
So we're at the whim of the hospital. There's other processes and mechanisms that could be introduced, and we've talked about that with the hospital, about having sufficient security where they feel comfortable releasing them to us. And quite frankly, having changes in the Mental Health Act that allow us to take them to other service providers that we feel comfortable, or the Act dictates that are acceptable places to deliver them. So it's not just falling on the hospital emergency department, which is also dealing with serious traumatic physical ailments. If there's other mechanisms in place that we could take them, that would be fantastic. So get back to your magic wand. If I had truly a magic wand, I'd make sure that everybody was safe and you didn't need us. In a perfect world, you wouldn't need the police.
Well, I
but
do
the
want to
reality
say
is we
that
not.
last summer, the fire department canceled fire. If you remember, there was no fire allowed. Remember, we had the locally before you got here. Like, there's no fire allowed. Well, why doesn't police just cancel crime then?
We should have done
if
that.
fire department's canceling fire, it's like that was a brilliant strategic move.
I wish I had brought that up with the city council the other night. That would have been a great.
If we could just cancel crime for
Make a new bylaw.
But it is different though, like what policing today than 20 years ago, and I'm assuming massive resources goes to the mental health, addictions, and homeless
for sure
file.
You know, if I had the same 6 officers, you know, let's just pick a number. If I had 10 officers to deal with a situation, if they're spending 70 to 80% of their time dealing with the things you mentioned, homelessness, addictions, and mental health, that's 8 of those officers are tied up. 8 out of 10 officers would be tied up daily. And I got 2 officers to do all those things where you're calling and complaining about speeding on your street, and you're calling about your shed being broken into for the 15th time.
Yeah.
I've only got 2 officers to do anything. They can go and take the calls, but I got nobody to do anything proactive. If I had all 10 of those officers, I could dress up 5 of them in plain clothes and sit in your backyard and waiting for the bad guys to show up. We don't have those opportunities. So I think that's the big difference, is we don't have the time to do a lot of the proactive stuff that, you know, Sir Robert Peel's, I think one of his tenets was the absence of crime is a true indication of the success of a police service. Not response times, not the number of charges laid. It's the absence of crime.
Right.
So we don't have the time to do the proactive work to put people in jail to move forward that possibility of absence of crime, because we're too busy responding to the real crimes that are being committed.
Tell me more about the auxiliary program that you're talking about. I have a couple questions about it, but do you see it helping, like perhaps on the handoff with the hospital, providing security that to free up?
Not necessarily. So we do have a special constable unit, and that's something we'd also like to look to expand. So special constables have certain powers under the Police Services Act or the new Community Safety and Police Act. We primarily use them right now for prisoner care and control in the police station, while in our cell block. Also at courts when we have prisoners that are coming back and forth from detention centers. They are our court security management unit. They transport the prisoners. They look after the prisoners. We're looking to expand their roles and potentially, again, under the guidelines of the Community Safety and Policing Act, there's certain criteria that have to be met. But we are exploring, can we use them for foot patrol in the downtown core? Can we use them to answer the phones and take some of those smaller, you know, I don't want to diminish crime, because if your shed's broken into, that's a big deal for you. But on the bigger picture of what we deal with, maybe that's something a special constable can handle over the phone and take the report, get all the information they need so that an officer doesn't have to come to your house. So we're looking at diminishing workload with the use of special constables. Special constables could be used in the case that you just mentioned of freeing up our officers. We send the special constable to look after the prisoner until he's admitted by the physicians. The auxiliary is more of they're volunteers. So there are special constables that are currently employed by us and they get paid. Auxiliaries would be volunteers who receive special training, and they come out, you know, requirement can be you have to give 10 hours a month. So they get a uniform, like I said, a different color uniform, so they're distinguished. They have an auxiliary flash versus just the patch. But they would traditionally help directing traffic for parades, manning a booth that the police services runs at a community event, at something down at the waterfront. They can go out on patrol with the officers, and they do receive special training to assist the officers when they're making an arrest and things like that. But primarily, they're extension arm of the police service, primarily to get involved in community services. So the benefit to the community is there's people out there that would love to do a job like that. As you know, people are looking for volunteer opportunities. They have no interest in being a police officer. I just want to give back to the community, and I'd love to get involved. There's also younger people who have an interest in policing who need to pad their resume or demonstrate they've matured a little bit, dip their toe in the water, see if it's right for them, and get some experience. That's a great on-the-job interview for us to hire police officers or special constable pool from. I started my career as an auxiliary officer when I was in college. The deputy chief started his policing career. I've met so many police leaders I know started their career in auxiliary units. And the one I ran in Woodstock, was much different than one in London. London was more run by the organization. The auxiliary unit we had in Woodstock, we had good leaders in the auxiliary unit, and they have rank within the unit that doesn't override the rank of our police officers. But they had a structure where they really, you give them a project and they kind of looked after themselves. When we do door knocks to deliver crime prevention tips, like the Lock It or Lose It campaign, those are the kind of things that we'd have an auxiliary officer do. From a volunteer perspective, instead of staffing a community event or doing an event like that, crime prevention tip with 5 or 6 or 10 employees that we're paying, we can use volunteers who want to do that volunteer work and use those 5 or 6 or 10 employees to do other police work.
I'll just preface this by saying I was in Sweden in January, and it was really interesting because my daughter wants to be in policing, and we always will talk to an officer wherever we happen to travel. And I said, "Why is there 2 different uniforms?" And said, "Oh, because the other uniform you see, they're not police officers, they're more security. Police officers do policing. These officers, it wasn't like security like we have here. They'll do traffic, crowd control, all the." I went, well, that's kind of brilliant. Like, it seems obvious, right? So you're the minor things you can have someone else who's, I'll say, less trained because they don't need to do all the different things. So I say that. So I asked the question. I think it's a brilliant idea, but how does a police association feel about that? Are they like, because I know you work in a union environment, and usually something like that is like, well, no, we should have more police. Yes, and there's a budget. I know there's a balance you're doing.
Right. Because the majority of the police services in the province do have auxiliary units.
Okay.
And our local association members are part of the Police Association of Ontario. I don't think it'll be a hard sell. I've already had conversations with their executive. They know what my intentions are. I think the devil's always in the details. So as we work together in defining what that role looks like in North Bay, I think they'll see it as a win-win. For both sides, as long and as an organization, we have to be cautious that we're not replacing police officers' duties with volunteers, as that's always that threshold we don't want to cross. So I think it's just a matter of we'll implement it. I think they're in agreement to it. It's just how we implement it and defining what that looks like is just going to be the things we have to work out together.
Gotcha.
That was the one thing I was going to ask you about, and along those same lines, I come from a union background, and it was like whenever I hear someone say it's a good thing for someone to volunteer for. Well, a young guy interested in policing, how many hours a month would you need him to volunteer to prove himself so that he isn't considered you're getting free labor?
Right. I think that'll have to be defined with our talks with the association.
I think that'd be their concern too.
I think, to be honest, if he's if that volunteer wanted to put in 40 hours a week, as long as it's not replacing work done by a police officer, I don't think either side would have a problem with it. But we'd have to define what that line looks like.
My guess would be, and this is a complete guess, would be policing today, most would go, thank God. Yes, we would love to have just a little bit more support on things that are not as policing.
Yeah. And when I talk about, the same could be said when we talk about special constables and introducing them into roles that maybe were traditionally done by police officers. We're getting to the point now and it's not just here, it's across the province, but staffing levels are such that the extra work that's required, the overtime that's required, the things that we don't normally staff for, like big events in the community that we need extra people for, or traffic initiatives we want to do where we need extra people for because it's above and beyond what we normally do every day, we're putting out for overtime, but they're just tired. They've worked their 50, 60-hour week, and they want to spend time with family. So when I talk about wellness, I can't speak out of both sides of my mouth and say, I want you to have that work-life balance and then demand that they work 60 hours a week. It's counterintuitive. It's counter message from what I'm trying to say. So I think you could be very well right. They could look at this and say, thank God we don't have to do that anymore. Yeah. And we've got somebody who will do it with us. Not for us, but with us.
I've heard the same thing when, because I remember many years ago, that was one of the things you had, I'll call it the side hustle, that police officers would do outside work, right? For the movie industry or whatever happened, concerts and things like that. But my sense is that it's hard to find anybody that wants to work the overtime anymore because they're exhausted. Yeah.
And when I was a young constable, I worked a lot of extra duties. Young family, you're trying to support them, and they get paid well, which is fantastic. They should get paid well. They do a lot of things that not everybody can do, and a lot is asked of them. but there comes a point where it's like, I've done enough. I can't do anymore. I need a break.
So let's, as we get to near the end, and sorry if I'm jumping on
No,
anything,
that's
Dave,
good.
if
Go
there's
for
any
it.
questions. Want to know a little bit about you. So you're moving from Southern Ontario up here. I grew up in Southern Ontario as well. And then I remember my first trip up here, I thought I was coming up to like the Arctic or something, and like a lot of people do. Then once you live here, it's like, I actually go to Toronto more, like downtown Toronto, and see like from events and concerts and sporting events more now than I did when I lived in Scarborough. So what's moving to the north now? Do you ice fish? Do you snowmobile? What's your thing? When you come up to the north, you got to have some outdoor activities.
I have never ice fished.
Come
But I'm
on!
looking forward to it. I've been invited several times by a friend of mine who used to come up here a lot to ice fish. Never came. I did have a snowmobile when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But I got rid of it because Southern Ontario was hit and miss whether you got snow or not. I've skied in the past. I've cross-country skied in the past. I like to walk outside with the dogs, so I think I can adapt.
Yeah.
We're eagerly and maybe not so eagerly anticipating shadfly season because every person we've talked to, have they told you about the shadflies? Yes, they have. We're okay.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. But so my kids are mostly older and moved out of the house. My wife and I, since we've come up here, she spent a lot of time. We have a granddaughter on the way in June, and another one of our sons getting married in September. So it's going to be a busy summer.
Yeah.
Running back and forth to the south. But in fact, we were out again last night for a walk. The sunsets here along the waterfront are fantastic. We've been out walking at Duchesne Falls. We love to hike.
Yeah.
And we've just scratched the surface, I'm sure, as to what's out there for us to see.
There's
so
lots.
we're really, really looking forward to it. And I've met so many people who said, I came here and I never left. I came to go to school here and I never left.
Yeah, that was me. I came here. This was a quick stop. Yeah. I was heading to Toronto to work at a rock and roll station, and it's like, I loved it here.
Yeah.
I never left.
Yeah. So we're really impressed so far, and we're really looking forward to what this community has to offer. And selfishly for us, and even the restaurants and stuff, it's not all franchises here. You've got unique coffee shops and unique restaurants, and we're actually eager. We want our kids to come up. We want our friends to come up and visit, because I think once they're exposed to this, some of what we've said already, some of our older kids are going, oh, maybe we'll look at jobs up there. Like maybe so I think it's an opportunity for our whole family to try something different that they never would have considered. My wife and I have never moved away from the Woodstock area. Yeah. So this is a big adventure for us.
It is. I use, people say, you going away this summer? I go, no, I went away last summer, but I miss it. I like being here. We have a nice house on the lake, and I love it. And friends come and visit. And so when my brother comes, he's in Pickering, so we grew up in Scarborough together, and he'll come up, and then we'll have a beautiful night, just watching the sunset and having a few laughs. And I said, this is what Tuesday looks like for us. It's not just weekends.
Well, the
Tuesdays are
deputy
nice.
made a joke, because I said when I came here, I said there's this 1 week that we have a cottage booked, because we traditionally book a cottage and we travel around the province. He said, Daryl, you live in a cottage now. You don't have to go to a cottage.
It's so true. It's so true. I actually had a cottage for a time, and then eventually, after 10 years, we went, wait a second. Why are we leaving here to drive to Muskoka? Is like, this is ridiculous. So it's great to have you here, Chief. Great. You're really open, and I love that. You're welcome to come and talk anytime you want, and tell us what's happening out there, and we invite you back anytime.
I just had one last question. I have to ask about the body cameras. Because that's an issue I think is important to policing here, and I think a lot of people believe that it'll be a positive for both the police and people who feel they may have been victimized by police. Where does it sit?
I'm very open to the idea, the concept. I think it does demonstrate transparency. I think I truly believe none of our officers have any concerns with it. It's not about being private. What I do have concerns when I got here, it seemed like we had a lot going on internally, especially from a technology perspective. Mm-hmm. And, a former boss of mine always said, you crawl before you walk and you walk before you run. And if you try to do too much too fast, you get into a speed wobble. And I saw a little bit of the potential that we were getting into a bit of a speed wobble by trying to do too much at once. So I kind of put a timeout on the body-worn camera specifically, because the back end of the body-worn camera piece requires civilian staff to redact information, to process information, to prepare it for court, which is a huge, huge task, to the point I think the estimates I've seen from this organization who've done the research prior to is they need 5 to 7 civilian staff to do that. Wow. Those 5 to 7 civilian staff weren't in place. So to move forward when we don't have the whole process, I think was just setting us up for failure in trying to meet
what would it cost
deadlines
to operate, implement body-worn cameras?
I haven't looked at the numbers here, but I know if you just consider 5 civilian staff alone and the technology and the hardware, you probably could be looking anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million. Again, I haven't looked at the specifics, so it is quite costly as well. And if the communities and the council and the tax base is willing to pay it, I'm 100% when the timing is right for us. And I don't say that because we're trying to dodge it. I say when we have the staffing in place. I have a number of staffing issues. We have a number of vacancies that need to be filled. We're trying to prioritize what those vacancies are so that we can continue to deliver frontline services. To add on something else that we don't necessarily have to do right now, when we're ready, when the staffing is in place, I think that's the time to move forward. I think Chief Todd had it. The table's been set. We're ready to push the button once we have the right processes and the right people in place. I think it's just a matter of waiting until that happens.
How many? Ben's our producer here in the studio. So how many shows will you do in a week? How many podcast shows will you do in a week?
That I produce?
Yeah.
4.
So imagine, as you're explaining that, imagine if you had, I don't know how many cameras, probably 10 cameras a night or something, 24 hours a day. They have to be edited. They have to be logged. They have to be, I can't even imagine what you have to do with all of that. The logistics behind that. We have one person that does 4 podcasts that are an hour long each a week. You're right.
He also does a bunch of client stuff he just didn't mention.
But even 10. But these are 24-hour, it all has to be logged and cataloged and all this stuff when it comes in. It doesn't just sit there. It has to be done.
It's the redaction piece that's the huge hiccup because we have to disclose everything we have has to be disclosed to the Crown when we lay a charge.
Right.
So you can imagine you and I are partners. We have body cameras on. We go to a noisy party. There's an assault that takes place. We make an arrest while we're in there. That whole 13 minutes we were in there, we've just picked up every single person and every single conversation that was going on in there. So now we disclose just the assault piece and the arrest piece to the Crown. We have to go through that entire 13-minute video, redact faces, redact conversations. I do a traffic stop, and while I'm dealing with you you're the driver, my radio's going off and they're running someone else. You're running you across town. That's all got to be redacted. So all those pieces have to. Now AI is going to help us out with that. I think the technology is advancing where we can put search parameters on and it'll redact a lot of it. It still needs that human touch to make sure nothing gets unnecessarily disclosed because we don't want the risk of accidentally disclosing some private information.
Right.
Big no-no. So we want to make sure, again, we just want to make sure the processes are in place and the people are in place before we move forward. And we're not the only ones. There's some large GTA forces that had announced we're rolling down this path that have put the time out saying oh my gosh, we're getting to that speed wobble I talked about and we're not ready yet. So let's just put the brakes on until we're ready.
Right.
Fair enough. Great answer. Very articulate. Welcome to the community.
Yeah.
Seems like you have your heart in the right place. So
I do. I want to do the officers. I've been very impressed with the officers, the members. They're professional. They want to do the right thing. I just want to give them the best tools and the right number of people. Like I said, we can fill the vacancies, get some people back to work that have been off work. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to be doing very well. They're very eager. They want to. And the opportunity I have is because I'm new, I can implement change. Whereas somebody who's been here a while, it's harder.
For sure.
There's 2 things cops don't like: it's change and the way things are. Mm-hmm. So introducing those at the right time and getting their buy-in. And I think because I'm new, I'm getting buy-in just because they're thinking, okay, let's try him out. Let's give him some runway and see if he hangs himself. Runway rope. But yeah, I'd happy to come back anytime and discuss matters. And if we want to do this on a regular basis, we can consider that too.
Well, I'm reluctant to say I'm impressed with the new city police chief.
Wow. Look at you, Dave.
I'm getting soft in here,
You're
man.
Totally
this is the wrong environment for a journalist.
It is a wrong environment for a journalist. He was very articulate.
Yeah.
He didn't I think you had asked him a couple of tougher questions and he, nothing overly pointed, but he spoke to everything. He says, let's just hit a pause on, with the cameras and I get it. Can you imagine now they have to budget that and they have to come and taxpayers have to pay for it.
The
right?
one thing I was going to counter on that, and I didn't just because it gets into the weeds, but I think there's an economy of you can formulate the cost of doing that against the lawsuit settlements that they have to do because they can't prove that they did the right thing when there's a complaint or there's some other stuff. I'd like to see those numbers sort of crunch.
Yeah.
Because every settlement's like big. Right?
Yeah.
When there's a settlement. I don't even know how many settlements, but I think I remember talking to somebody about this like 8 years ago, right? It's been a long time. They've been talking about cameras, right? So, and that's part of the equation. It just helps solve a lot of problems when there's complaints and no witnesses.
I agree. I'm all for it. And
Do it right.
At the end of the day, you have to balance out, like, there's many things that we could be doing. It'll be a cost to the taxpayers, right?
But if they put cameras on the lights as the city goes that way to hand out automatic fines, I'm going to be fighting that tooth and nail.
Tell me why.
Because I don't like Big Brother having its camera everywhere. Once in a while, you have no choice. You have to run that yellow because the guy behind you is running it. You can't stop. And if I ever got a ticket in a situation where
you can fight it.
Yeah, well, then I have to have a camera on my car to show that the guy was on my tail.
You can get those.
I don't know. I don't like cameras. I don't like cameras. Cameras are everywhere.
I don't like microphones and cameras. It's crazy. Me neither.
Next thing you know, they're going to give me this device to carry around that tracks me.
Because we're involved in a road safety project in the city of North Bay.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it.
Yeah, but it's really interesting because they were talking about cameras yesterday, and then it's just showing it. You're right. It absolutely lowers different things like running red lights. So the number one place that people get into accidents is at intersections with lights. Mm-hmm. Number one in our city. Every 4 days, there's a major accident that causes either an injury or death in our city. So what are the tools that we can use to actually, dampen some of those numbers? And so it really comes down to cameras prove they do work, but often we as a community don't have the stomach for just what you said about cameras.
Well, if I was a guy trying to get by, feed the family, pay the rent, I'm late for work, and I get one of those massive tickets because I ran a yellow light. Excuse my language. If I ran a yellow light, I would be taking a baseball bat to every camera, excuse my language, in the town. I'd lose it because I don't need that. I'm trying to get through life.
Right.
Yeah, and there was nothing unsafe. Nobody got hurt when I did it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't cause an accident.
Hey, nobody got hurt when you're running drugs, cigarettes, and alcohol back when you were 5.
Yeah, they're all dead. Anyways, that's just again the authority thing. I
really
don't like
fired up. You do not like authority.
No, you know that.
I know that.
You're finding that out.
Oh yeah, I'm finding that.
Anyways, it was a good conversation. I'm glad we went.
I like him.
And had him in, and right on. Well, thank you very much for watching another Echo Essentials podcast.
I'm Scott Clark.
And I'm Dave Dale.